Did you know that YouTube reaches more American adults age 18 to 34 than any cable TV network? We'll discuss this and other interesting facts about the impact of social media on society with media psychologist Dr. Anthony Bryson on this episode of The Curious Professor. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. B. Welcome to the Curious Professor podcast, where I take listeners on a journey of discovery to explore the people, places, artifacts, and natural wonders that spark my curiosity. On this episode of the Curious Professor podcast, we'll talk with Dr. Anthony Bryson, media psychologist, author, and scholar about social media and information security. But first, a trivia question. On average, how many tweets are sent per day on Twitter? I'll have the answer for you at the end of this episode. I'm thrilled to have the other Dr. B on my show today. Dr. Anthony Bryson is one of only a few dozen individuals who holds a doctorate in the field of media psychology. He specializes in the science of understanding media and political messaging. Dr. B earned a PhD in psychology with a concentration in media from Fielding Graduate University, where he has served as an adjunct faculty member. Dr. B has taught in psychology and information technology at Ottawa University, Mesa Community College, and the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA via extension. Dr. B's research interests include global media and social change, social media and emerging technology, media ethics, media and political psychology, and the psychologies of persuasion, repetition, perception, emotion, memory, and learned helplessness. Aside from being involved in higher education, Dr. B has worked in the information technology field for over 3 decades, including 15 years in public service with law enforcement and local government. Dr. B has held C-level executive positions in both higher education and government, and continues to be a thought leader in the adoption of technology, information security, and the evolution of public sector services to meet 21st century expectations. The other Dr. B and I talk a lot about social media and its impact. I hope this interview with him will spark your curiosity too. Welcome to the show, Dr. B. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dr. B. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
What's the most interesting thing about you?
Great question. I'd say I'm considered a polymath. I've been very lucky to have been exposed to a lot of different information growing up. I had older siblings, much older siblings. I was the youngest in the family by 7 years, and my eldest sibling was almost 18 years older than me. So anytime that I wanted to participate in discussions and such, I had to up my game and speak to them on their particular level. So one of the things that I did to try and be able to converse with them at their level was to go and read their books. Most of them were, textbooks from school or some really deep philosophical stuff because that's the age that they were at. So it helped me develop an understanding of a lot of different subjects, like commerce, politics, medicine, engineering, and theology. And I developed that understanding at a very young age. So that kind of gave me a really good basis from which to speak to many different topics. It's also good that I've worked in many interesting market verticals. I've worked both in the private and public sector. Like most kids, I started my career in retail. Right out of high school, I was very successful and was managing multiple retail locations before the age of 21. So that was something that was kind of odd to see. From there, I went and pursued my first love, which was graphic arts, but I quickly came to the understanding of what starving artist really means. and found out that there just isn't any money when you're starting out in that particular field. So that took me into the oil and gas sector, where I got just an incredible exposure to a lot of information, especially from the engineering perspective and especially from the information technology perspective. That's where I started my information technology career. So, I did that. That really gave me a deep understanding of many of the societal and cultural issues that we were dealing with. Another interesting facet about who I am is that I'm an athlete. Always been an athlete, and over the years I became fairly accomplished as an athlete, having played baseball, softball, hockey, and golf at very high levels. I actually went to the nationals in slow pitch a couple of times, and then after the .com crash, I worked as a golf professional while I reset my professional and career goals. So to put it eloquently, I would say that I've always been a bit of an overachiever, and that plays a large role in who and what I am. And thankfully, being a polymath has helped in that regard.
And for those of us who may not have a dictionary handy, how would you define polymath?
Polymath is somebody that is fluent and can speak to a number of different subject areas and provide some level of expertise in that regard. So again, very fortunate where I've been exposed to a lot of different information, different types of information, different verticals, and am fully capable of stepping in and speaking in those particular areas.
Would you consider yourself a Renaissance man?
That's actually somebody that I have always attempted to emulate, was Da Vinci. So I would say yes.
Why did you choose media psychology for your doctoral studies?
Actually, I don't think I chose media psychology. I think media psychology chose me. I really had no interest or intent to pursue higher education growing up. I met and married a hardcore academic, and she motivated me to think differently about education. So when I went and saw her receive her doctorate when she graduated from Saybrook University, it really had a major impact on my life when she had her 3 minutes at the podium and stood up there and said a whole bunch of really, really nice things about her husband and made me cry. That was the moment when I decided that payback was going to be a bitch and that it was going to start off with me going back to school at age 40. So going to school to earn my degree was not ultimately my decision. It was more a reaction to something that my wife did. So going to school and earning a degree, I happen to be very fortunate or unfortunate, depending upon which side of the coin you want to look at here, that I had a fantastic professor who showed a lot of interest in me and what I did. Dr. Greg Jones saw something in me that I didn't. He felt that there was something inside me that just screamed doctoral candidate. So after my first class and him being my advisor, we sat down and he asked me at the terminus of that first class, what's my PhD going to be in? And I was like, dude, I just want to get through my undergraduate degree. I don't want to think about anything else. And he was very much, no, we're going to focus on getting you into a doctoral program. I see something special in you. And I thank him for that because I don't think I ever would have pursued this myself. So when it actually came down to trying to decide which particular program to go after, it was mostly Dr. Jones. So ultimately, it was Greg who went out and found the program, found the schools, and really wrote a glowing cover letter for my application that really got me in. So I was a direct intake from an undergrad program into a PhD program, and that's just because of, I think, what Dr. Jones did for me. Now, media psychology was always interesting to me because it was a confluence of three worlds that always interested me: motivation, media, and politics. This started at a very young age when I actually read Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man. It was my older brother's book, and I wanted to be part of the conversation, so I had to read it. I didn't understand the vast majority of it at the time, but as I grew older, each of those chapters took on a new life and gave new meaning. I was set on the course by the desire to be accepted by those around me, which again goes back to my interest in motivation. The fact I was able to turn my interest into something of value in higher education was actually very fortunate. To be considered an expert on something is still very strange to me, as I was raised to believe that there's always someone else out there that is smarter than you or more informed than you. So ultimately that keeps me in check and makes me extremely uncomfortable when someone approaches me and says, "You're the subject matter expert on X, Y, or Z."
What are some ways in which social media enriches our lives?
That's actually a great question because social media was supposed to bring us together. I look at it as it allows us to connect and stay connected. We look at family and friends. You've got your inner circle on Facebook or any other social media platform, and that's how you stay connected with those particular individuals. You can keep connected with your work associates by using a product like LinkedIn. It was designed to help us connect and stay connected. Another important facet of social media is it allows us to build communities. We can bring diverse groups together without the prejudging that comes with interpersonal communications, bring them together and have them find connections that build strong, solid communities. We can share broad ideas and experiences we would not normally be able to do through self-exploration. So again, it allows us to build communities and experiences that normally we would not be able to do. It also allows us to be informed. Social media is very immediate, so it allows us to share details about important events happening contemporaneously around us and make sure that all the people within our circle understand what is going on at any given time. It also allows all of us to have a voice. Social media can be very democratizing because it allows everyone to have a voice regardless of socio or economic measures. Social media is a great concept and could be used for good, but humans have ways of turning good things bad. I always go back to Spider-Man and Uncle Ben's final breath warning to Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and the evolving superhero he was becoming. His dying breaths were, "With great power comes great responsibility." Of course, this is an allusion to the fable of the Sword of Damocles and understanding their benefits and detriments to any situation, practice, or event, and that technology is just another thing that we have to understand. There's pros and cons too. We must find a way to strike a balance to maintain control over the very mechanism that we're willing to surrender ourselves to.
So now that we've had a decade of being entrenched in social media, what do you see as some of the detriments of social media to us as individuals?
Well, since I was mentioning earlier that there's two sides to every coin, let's go back down the exact same path. Some of the detriments are it allows us to connect and stay connected. We're always tapped into the stream of consciousness, right or wrong. Our relationships ultimately suffer because we're connected into those things. We're connected into the virtual world, and because of that, we ignore the real world around us. And the relationships we have within that particular space are hurt because we're always stuck with our phone in our face. Ultimately, it hurts the social interactions that we have. I don't know how many times the two Dr. B's go out to dinner and we sit and people watch and watch young couples texting back and forth across the table from each other. It's kind of really strange to watch, and we get a big laugh out of it, but it's also very disappointing to see because these people are missing out on that human interaction. They really I don't think that they understand how important looking somebody in the eye and having that conversation with them is. So I think that's a huge detriment that social media brings to the table. It also leads to a loss of social skills. I think we're developing an entire generation of people that don't know how to read social cues. They don't know how to interact with each other. They just don't understand what it means to walk into a room, make a first impression, or understand first impressions. So I think we're generating a whole generation that is going to be socially challenged when it comes to having these these interactions. That's a major downfall of social media. Going back to, it allows us to build communities. Yes, it does, but it also helps isolate us. It puts us into our bubbles. And we don't like to get outside of those bubbles. We have become communities that do not like to have anybody challenge the way that we think or the way that we believe about certain issues. It creates these isolation bubbles that we have a very hard time getting out of. And it prevents an infusion of new thoughts and ideas that are meant to expand those particular bubbles and expand our communities. One of the major downfalls is the way information is shared. Social media is supposed to keep us informed, but it ultimately allows the spread of disinformation. I'm not just talking about the spread of misinformation versus disinformation. I'm talking the willful spread of disinformation. Misinformation being when you accidentally share incorrect facts pertaining to a particular subject matter. Disinformation is when you intentionally go and spread lies to help promote your particular ideological agenda. So that's where we're running into problems when it comes to information shared within social media. Facebook became the absolute best point of spreading disinformation during both the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections. So these are things that we have to understand and we have to get better at as we start using and consuming social media. And as far as it giving everybody a voice, there's a little bit of a challenge there. Are all voices equal? Should everybody have a voice at certain tables? Just because you have a voice does not mean that you can speak to a given topic. If you have no expertise, does your voice hold the same weight and value as somebody that does have a PhD and years of research experience on a given topic? If we're talking astrophysics, should your voice hold the same weight as someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson? I think not, but that's just me. As far as having a voice, one of the challenges that we're running into right now is it amplifies voices that should not have access to the social media consciousness. I'm talking about some of the extremist groups out there. I'm talking about a lot of the hate groups that are out there. They should not have a seat at the table. There comes a point where your First Amendment rights should come along with some level of responsibility, and these people do not respect the responsibility that comes along with having a voice. Their message is all about hate and division, not discussion of actual issues. So we must safeguard against that particular issue. And again, going back to sort of a previous point, I think we have to look at expertise and how expertise is being diminished or even identified as the enemy in many regards. And that's sad. And that's all because social media has evolved or devolved into almost a cesspool.
That leads me into the next question. How do you think social media has impacted society the most?
I think it's made us more self-absorbed, isolated, and uninformed. I think that if you look at people's behaviors, they become much more narcissistic, especially when it comes to their social media feed. It's all about, hey, look at me, look at what I'm doing, as opposed to, hey, let's look at a particular issue. Let's talk about something of importance. I don't want to see pictures of what you had for lunch. To me, that's a waste of bandwidth. I care about what you think and feel on certain things because we should all come together and discuss larger issues. But as far as, how you think about your lunch, really, I don't think that's something of significance or importance that we need to be sharing amongst each other unless we're talking about possibly some type of outbreak of salmonella poisoning or ptomaine. So that's one of the things that is kind of a negative outcome as we become very much more narcissistic. I think that there is an extreme level of unmatched egocentrism gripping our society. Everybody is an expert, but nobody has any true actual expertise. We can pick, any particular subject you want to talk about, whether it be the abortion debate or climate change, any big issue. Everybody has an opinion, but nobody has any expertise to really talk about it. Why do you have that particular opinion? Well, I can't articulate that. Well, if you can't articulate it, how about you keep your thought to yourself?
Or examine why you have those beliefs.
Exactly. I think that's one of those reasons why we keep retreating back into these information bubbles and isolating into small-minded communities. The exchange of ideas truly is a rare thing these days. We're surrounding ourselves by people who want to hear the same things that we think we know, as opposed to discussing the things that we don't know and need to know.
Well, it's also comforting to have that constant sense of validation.
It is. It is. And that's a big part of social media and part of the big problem of social media. Everybody is always talking about, hey, here's the way things are, right or wrong, and usually wrong. And whenever someone brings some new information to the table, they're the ones who get chastised and expelled from the group. So it comes down to group dynamics. People want to maintain membership in that circle that they've created, that social group that they've created. So they're not going to do anything that could possibly rock the boat and see them kicked to the curb. So that's a major, major problem, and one of the negatives of social media that I think is really plaguing the country. Now, to me, the worst part of social media is the spread of disinformation. Facts no longer matter. Opinions matter more than facts. And you can see that in a lot of the stuff that continues to get shared on social media and presented as facts. If I have someone share yet another Tucker Carlson video about what he thinks versus what he can prove, I'm going to pull my hair out. Frankly, I think that social media is the top contributing factor to the dumbing down of America because we don't challenge the information that comes into our social media feed. We already accept it because it's coming directly into our feed. We believe anything that comes into our feed is a trusted source of information, which it's not. We must safeguard against that. So we must look at things, I think, a little more critically and also start to develop the ability to challenge bad information. Because frankly, I think that that's a dead skill. The ability to challenge bad information is pretty much dead. Alternative facts can be created in the echo chamber and quickly repeated to gain traction and establish a new trust based on nothing more than an opinion. That's a very, very dangerous thing, something we have to prevent from happening in the future. And ultimately, what used to be the way of challenging these facts was through debate. Well, debate is pretty much the greatest casualty in all of this. Information used to be challenged through debate where issues were raised, a position taken, an argument made using facts as support, and then a rhetorical battle back and forth attempting to either credit or discredit the position. We don't do that anymore. We get into pissing matches over opinions, and only opinions matter.
What are your predictions for the future of social media?
Not many positive ones. I think that social media will continue to be the downfall of our culture and our society. We'll continue to get divided into smaller or more easily controlled groups and communities. I think that disinformation will replace facts, and we will no longer be able to take on large scale or critical issues. We're going to look at things like climate science and truly bury our heads in the sands and wait for the world to burn down around us. From what I see in social media, I firmly believe that the extreme voices at the edges of the political sphere will continue to have the loudest and most influential voices because they are most motivated to make change. They want to see the extreme become accepted as the norm. So they, in turn, are going to continue to push their voices forward and use social media as that much-needed amplifier to get that message out. Even though the vast majority of the world thinks they're crazy, it doesn't matter. Those voices will be out there. They'll be in your face all the time. They'll be in your feed all the time. And at some point, they're going to convince you that they're right and everything else, including the natural order, is wrong. So I hate dichotomous solutions to problems because most problems are very complex and require multifaceted conclusions. But we really need to either regulate social media and penalize the extremists who spread disinformation, or we need to outlaw social media altogether. I don't say this lightly because of the potential for these particular platforms to bring us together, but the products that they've been weaponized and they've been turned against our society, causing it to fracture into small pieces. Patrick Henry is most remembered for his utterance of "give me liberty or give me death." But we should also remember that he was the one who stated that united we stand, divided we fall. We can no longer allow social media to divide us as our collective society is now at risk.
You're also an information security expert. Tell us about some of the security risks we take when we engage in social media.
Let's just start right out of the gate. Your personal information you put at risk every time you take to your social media feed. I don't know how many people share way too much information on their social media feed. When you look at, say, like your banking solutions, a lot of times they will ask you security questions. And those security questions are based off of information that you routinely and freely share on your social media feed. So if somebody is monitoring your social media feed, they can figure out the answer to those questions, and they can get into those particular business platforms that you use. So you have to be very careful there. And you also have to be very careful about identity theft. The more information you give out about yourself, the more easier you make it for other people to steal your identity and do nefarious things on your behalf. Take out credit cards, take out mortgages, get car loans. So I think you have to be extremely careful about that. When you're on social media, keep your schedule private. Don't be telling people, bragging to people that you're about to go on vacation for 2 weeks and let everybody know where you live. All you're doing is inviting other people that have access to your particular social media to know when you're out of town and when it's okay to go and break into your house and clean the place out. Also be wary of where you are. There's so many people who just love to go out and take selfies of themselves and then immediately go and post them on their Facebook wall. I can't tell you how dangerous that is because unbeknownst to most people, there's information that is tagged within those particular photographs. It's called XF data. And you can actually go and take a picture, run it through an XF reader, and it will tell you exact geolocation coordinates of where that picture was taken. So let's say you've got a crazy ex who still loves you, or worse, can't live without you and doesn't believe you should be able to live without that person, and they want to do harm to you. You're out with your pals, take a selfie and post it to your Facebook wall. Guess what? That particular person can then immediately pull that down, know exactly where you are within 3 feet. You're putting yourself at risk. So be careful of that. And then finally, most importantly, be afraid of fake apps, something that can install malicious code on your phone or your computer. You can go and click on a website and begin a download that could be loaded with ransomware. Be careful of that. Again, you're putting your information, your systems, and possibly your money at risk.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about you or your work?
Not that I can think of. I know we like to sit and talk about all sorts of subjects and all sorts of topics, but I think we've exhausted the ones that you want to talk about today. So let's just leave it at that.
And where can listeners find out more about you?
The only social media that I used is LinkedIn, and that is only because of the professional network that I try and maintain. If someone wants to connect with me, they can put together a well-thought-out request on LinkedIn, explain why they want to connect, and I will most likely accept that. I do not accept many requests via LinkedIn unless they're well articulated and have a purpose. So salesmen, you need not send a connection request. Other than that, I encourage you to contact Dr. B, and she'll make sure I get your contact information, and I will reach out to you.
It was great to have you on the show, Dr. B. Thank you so much for taking time to be a guest on the Curious Professor podcast.
No, Dr. B, thank you. It was very enjoyable. Dr. B, signing off.
And now for the answer to this episode's trivia question. On average, how many tweets are sent per day on Twitter? About 6,000 tweets are sent every second, which is over 350,000 tweets per minute and 500 million tweets per day. That's nearly 200 billion tweets per year. We'll end the show with something punny. Where should you post your photos of your fishing trip? On Finstagram. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Curious Professor podcast. If there's a person, place, artifact, or natural wonder that has sparked your curiosity and you'd like for me to feature it on the show, please let me know. My website is thecuriousprofessorpodcast.com. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe to the Curious Professor podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to become part of my community of curiosity seekers, be sure to visit my website, thecuriousprofessorpodcast.com, and join Dr. B's Hive. Until next time, always be learning and be curious with Dr. B.